Anthony Romeo here again, Wise Up Season 4. So Bob Voss, you might remember him from Season 3, the old crabby guy from Panduit Corporation. So Bob, welcome again. It's great to have you. So last time we had you on the show, I guess you had to bring reinforcements because you felt like I was picking on you, and that can't be because I'm not that intelligent in comparison to you. I'm not worthy when it comes to the amount of time and research that you've been dedicated to Panduit Corporation. So I thank you again, sir, for taking the time out of your hectic schedule as we're all working through this, global pandemic still. We're working at home, in our desk at the office. It's a hybrid solution. It's a new world out there, but we're still getting it done. And at the end of the day, that's what Wise Up is talking about. We're talking about the stuff behind the walls, above the ceilings, through the floors, that's keeping us all connected, folks. We're able to do podcasts, Zoom calls, Teams calls, whatever it is, your kids' school, streaming services. It's because of quality network infrastructure. And Mike, welcome. Season 4, Wise Up. Glad to have you from the enterprise business side of Panduit Corporation. Hold the applause. Mike, thanks for coming along with Bob. We really appreciate, and we're excited to hear what it is that Bob has been doing from the research side, but how you're implementing it from the business enterprise side. And with that, without further ado, how's everything been going, Bob, since the last time we talked?
Going great, Anthony. Thanks for having us back. Appreciate it. I'm keeping it crabby on this end.
Okay, good.
Well, I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah, no. So I can't comment enough on the amount of comments, likes, shares, posts that we're getting on the platform with Wise Up again. At the end of the day, folks, your kids can't download the new Disney Plus. You can't do the Zoom call in your underwears. You're not working in a smart building that has energy saving technology on an IoT platform without a quality network infrastructure. At the end of the day, the buildings cannot stand erect without a strong foundation. And the network infrastructure is the strongest foundation and the backbone of any building, whether it be schools, hospitals, manufacturing facilities, whatever it's out there. Panduit Corporation has a lot to offer. So I encourage you to listen up to Wise Up, that can be heard on Apple, Google, wherever you stream your services. We're broadcasting live from Anchor, and I thank those folks because even I can start a podcast now in season 4. So again, Bob, Mike, welcome. Mike, last time we were talking to Bob, we were talking about this thing that nobody cares to hear about. It's called single pair Ethernet. What's the difference between single pair Ethernet and 4-pair Ethernet? 4-pair and single pair. Because there's some people out there listening to the show and they're just, not ICT savvy.
Yeah, it's a great place to start because when people hear single pair Ethernet, they naturally latch on to Ethernet and say, well, it must be a next generation of 4-pair. And what's most important probably to understand and latch onto is the fact that we're running Ethernet over a single twisted pair, because that single twisted pair probably has more legacy connections in building and industrial automation than even Ethernet. There are a massive number of devices in the world that use RS-485, RS-232, protocols, various types of protocols to communicate, and it's all, none of that's Ethernet. It's all based on those communications, and the challenge is all of that data. When you talk about IoT, there's a ton of data being collected in those legacy protocols, and the only way to get that data available is to somewhere convert it to Ethernet. And so you're creating gateways and challenges to even take your data and make it usable in an Ethernet platform. What single pair Ethernet does is it's a transition, not from 4-pair, but it's a transition from those legacy 485 and 232 systems to make that data available immediately as it's generated. So the entire stack, the entire Ethernet stack applies, but the physical layer is now Ethernet, whereas in the past, customers would have had to create the data in maybe analog or a legacy protocol.
Yeah, and it's fascinating you say that. So in one of the recent episodes of last season, we were talking with Siska Hennessy Group, and they were talking about smart buildings. There's a lot of dumb buildings out there that are not truly dumb. They're to your point, they're legacy solutions that they're not talking to one another. So there needs to be some, streamlined platform where you can integrate these systems to become more energy efficient. And, everybody's talking about green, and we don't mean the color of the cable. Everybody is trying to reduce their carbon emission, right? So in one way, so power consumption, whether it be lighting, BMS, your shade control, whatever it may be, automation is on everybody's mindset, getting to be most efficient in the workspace. We were just talking about, the gentleman coming into the office, and as he leaves the office, the building knows. And how is that done? So with the design that you're talking about, taking legacy applications, how does that go from start to finish? And, walk us through that, if you will.
Yeah, here's the thing. When we're talking about single pair Ethernet, we're not necessarily adding new groundbreaking deliverables capabilities.
Right.
Although we could.
Although things can happen a lot more flexibly, and we could, but what we're talking about with legacy technology, you can do almost anything with legacy technology. The critical thing is you define exactly what's needed up front, define your requirements, and set up the system. And generally, you're going to be looking at it as separate silos. So you're going to be looking at if you're in an intelligent building, the HVAC silo for HVAC control, the lighting control system, wayfinding, and security. All of the different subsystems of the building would be defined independently and built as independent systems. The challenge with legacy is if you want to have HVAC and lighting system work with access control, that needs to be built up front with linkages between those individual control systems. And what they're learning, and industrial, following some partners in the industrial space, what they're learning is you are not going to be able to define to the nth degree all of the requirements that you have once your building is in place. So the more flexibly that you can define, that you can build your system to accommodate future requirements, the better off. And that means, right now it requires a lot of protocol conversion, a lot of gateways, a lot of how can we put something in place that we can allow systems to communicate, and gateways and controls. It's really challenging when you're dealing with dozens of different subsystems that don't naturally and organically communicate with each other.
Right.
There's an old saying that none of us is as smart as all of us. And that's really the problem with silos and legacy automation systems, is those systems are plenty smart, but what really makes them smarter, or what really creates the smart building or the smart factory environment, is when they can collaborate.
Right.
And that's the importance of Ethernet as a single protocol across the enterprise network, including the factory, including the building, is that it's all one language, and now those things can collaborate. And that's really the chief goal here. It's a physical layer thing. It's cool. We're doing it in a unique way, but ultimately that's what makes things smart, is that they can understand what's going on. I can see that it's a sunny day and I got a building with a lot of glass exposure, so I can turn down my energy cost on my lighting. And I'm going to probably need some more HVAC input because it is so sunny. I'm getting a lot of
Right.
passive heat gain in the building. So
Yeah,
it's really just letting those things talk to each other and figure out what to do.
yeah, and from a new build perspective, it's all fine and dandy because you're starting fresh. It's a clean canvas. But like the picture behind me is of the New York City skyline, but there's many skylines like that in Chicago, Philadelphia, and so many other places that are our oyster, if you will, because they have a ton of legacy equipment in there that would need that convergence, if you will. I mean, again, to start fresh is, everybody wants to have that brand new shiny penny, in the pocket. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of old buildings with a lot of legacy equipment out there that, the solutions that you're providing and you're describing, whether it be from a research or implementation, what Pandu Corporation brings to the table. Again, as I said in the beginning of this, it's the backbone is the network infrastructure, and deploying the right quality infrastructure to support the needs of a most efficient building. Because the IoT world that we're living in, it's not like in the future, it's here.
And you definitely have to deal with the brownfield upgrades for these buildings. That's what everyone's looking at for back to the office. We need to be able to make changes, and the existing infrastructure and how we transition from the existing infrastructure is critical. And that's why it's so valuable that what the IEEE has done is build an Ethernet technology that starts with 100 ohm balanced twisted pair, which is the foundation for hundreds of miles of cabling in those buildings behind you.
So the IEEE, so for the folks that don't know who are listening, the IEEE is a standards body for the design, communication, and building implementation. So the IEEE that Mike's referring to is a standards body. What other standards body? I know, Bob, you're part of the Ethernet Alliance in addition to working at Panduit for 30 years. What other standards? Was it Bixie? Is it TIA? Who else out there is looking at this solution that you're bringing to the table as somewhat of a standard or a recommendation?
Yeah, so excellent question, Anthony. And kind of IEEE is the Mac Daddy. They start things.
Right.
We come up with the market need and say, people are going to need to be able to do this. So we look really hard at legacy protocols and the things that single pair will replace and say, how could we do this? That sort of thing. And then basically IEEE's job is to come up with the data communications and electrical parameters to get the job done. And then you need other members of the standards community to help out with physical layer and things like that. So really important group to watch is TIA in their TR42 subcommittee, which handles physical layer for general purpose premises, residential, commercial buildings, industrial. And so they're going to come up with architectures and how do you wire it and what kind of connectors and that kind of thing. And they're going to document that stuff. The interesting part about it is you see the same faces when you're very active in the standards community. We really are a community. A lot of the guys that I work with at IEEE, I see them at the coffee pot at the TIA meeting. Well, back when we had in-person meetings. So that's an important one to look at. IEC is the International Electrotechnical Commission. They're a global organization, and they contribute things like cable standards, documenting the good cable and good test methods. Kind of same thing with connectors. There's IEC 63171 series of connectors that are all single pair connector standards. So it's really it's a group of organizations, and then you get kind of into the more specialized physical layer organizations and even software organizations like ODVA. which is its chief protocol is Ethernet IP, the dominant industrial Ethernet protocol at this particular time. Profi International, same thing. They've got Profinet, which is neck and neck with Ethernet IP. So those organizations all kind of put their brushstrokes on it, but it all starts with an IEEE standard, and then these, it's not a pejorative term, but the downstream organizations then actually make it real and make it something that's visible and deployable.
Yeah. And what we were saying before we started this episode of Wise Up about the new world, or the new normal that we're living in and operating in, the hybrid office scenario where you're working a few days at home, a few days in the office. It's feasible now, and again, that's because of the network infrastructure that's being provided to the residential community. I was on a call earlier today, and it's a consultant that is implementing standards for low voltage infrastructure in a multi-residential high-rise building. And years ago that did not exist. You didn't need a smart building, but whether it be in New York or Dubai or wherever in the world, if you're paying a king's ransom for these apartment buildings, that you don't want to be standing outside on 1 foot on your cell phone or trying to utilize your laptop, or your kid's tablet doesn't work because there's no access point that feeding, and the air conditioning is not working there properly. And there's a multitude of things that your company at Pandora Corporation is bringing to the table. So there's one particular solution, single pair Ethernet, that we're talking about today, is just I would say a teardrop in an ocean. And you're dedicating so much time and resources in it because of all the legacy legacy active components that are out there. It seems like there's a need. It's like Jordan Belfort from The Wolf of Wall Street, sell me the pen. There's a need. That's why you want this. It's because there's a need.
Yeah, and the single pair Ethernet is really the outflowing of all of the work that we've done in structured cabling in buildings, and now you get into the HVAC systems, all of the services that a building provides, and there are problems related to interaction between those subsystems, and we want them to communicate together because building operators need to manage the whole building, and providing management on the whole building is extremely difficult if you have one system that's operating based on Ethernet and then multiple other systems on different platforms. IT and they want to centralize the visibility to all of the different intelligent building subsystems.
The important part about the way that this is going to transform buildings and factories and automation systems is the importance of really forward-looking premier partners in the supply chain, because we're in the process, when this comes to maturity, of upending the way we build buildings today. We put in the electrical system, we put in the toilets, we put in the plumbing, we put in the natural gas for heat. All that stuff goes in first, the network goes in last. Well, now, if I have Ethernet enabled solid state lighting, I need a network in there so I can turn the lights on so the carpenter doesn't drill a hole in his hand putting up the wallboard. And so the supply chain, knowing that that's going to transform, knowing that different elements of the building are going to be needed at different times in the construction process that exists today, that's going to be huge, and that's going to be incredibly impactful. And it'll be, I think, drive a lot more business towards the right supply chain partners, because they're going to have that understanding. They're going to say, right, yeah, I know this is going to be different, and I'm going to make sure you get it right.
Absolutely.
And there's like, there are assumptions that we make, like everything in the building is going to be powered by AC wiring, that single pair Ethernet and Ethernet technologies can potentially provide value. Like, for example, if you have solar panels that are feeding directly into the building, now the only way to make that useful, if if you're in a traditional building, is to convert that from DC generation to an AC onto the wire. Well, meanwhile, most of the things that are running in the building are actually computers that take DC load. So then you have to take that and convert it from AC back to DC, and all that conversion loss. Whereas we have an existing technology with power over Ethernet, and now that extends to single pair, which for a lot of these devices, a lot of these things, think of a light. You don't need a lot of data on a light.
Right.
So a single pair can easily provide the data, and then single pair Ethernet can put up to 50 watts on that wire, which is quite a bit of power for a single lamp.
Well, all great points. And the last time that I had Peter Jones, who Bob Voss knows very well from Cisco Networks, we were talking about the Sinclair Hotel in Fort Worth, Texas. And the Sinclair Hotel, for those of you who don't know, it's a pre-war building. The hotel now was a hotel and still is a hotel, but the company that bought it, I believe, is Marriott chain now.
Yep.
But when it was designed in the early 2000s, it was implemented with future processes that we've been discussing in mind. So the lighting controls, there's a company that I had on Wise Up last season called Volt Server. Bringing the power over Ethernet is what they do. They have a small transmitter box. So basically they'll power company right to the substation, and then they distribute it on Ethernet cable. So throughout the facility, there is no AC needed or nor required. As you pointed out, all these devices, my laptop, my computers, my phone, nobody's running these massive generators that needs all this AC going through. You think back to Tesla and Edison, they've had those fights for years, and obviously Edison won. I think it was going back to a political thing with a guy named J.P. Morgan had his back, right? So I'll keep the history to a close, too short there. But nonetheless, companies like this, Volt Server, are utilizing the infrastructure like Pandu Corporation to provide the end result, running more efficient, intelligent IoT platform, and the capabilities is with solutions like single pair Ethernet. And we're seeing that more and more now. And it's not a concept, it's something that can be implemented. Let me ask you this, for contractors or people that are just in the ICT community, consultants, design engineers, to learn more about the SPE and what it is on the research and implementation, or how to deploy, other than call your friends at Wise Components for any of the Pandu needs. Where can one go for potential virtual conference or in-person meetings to learn more about the SPE solution at Panduit Corporation? Is it just www.panduit.com, or are there future things that we should be aware of on the horizon?
We have a great landing page at panduit.com on single pair, so that's a good starting point. Ethernet Alliance, as you alluded to, I chair the SPE subcommittee, and Panduit's a very active member of the Ethernet Alliance because they promote Ethernet in all forms and all places. Look what Ethernet can do. So those are great to look at. We've been flattered to be invited to provide educational content through Bixie. Myself and colleagues from other ICT companies have done some, panel style webinars that are pretty good. I think they're still available on demand through the Bixie training portal. TIA has a sub-organization called SPEC, which is Single Pair Ethernet Consortium. And there's a number of premier manufacturers there that are providing content. So
basically, this is not a super secret club where you have to pay. There's no membership fee. You could learn about what it is you're bringing to the table at no cost. The only benefit that you stand to gain is the knowledge how to save money and become more efficient in deploying.
exactly.
So,
If it
yeah.
if it weren't open, it wouldn't be valuable, frankly.
It'd be worthless.
The value is that this is a technology that anyone can use and deploy. What I would also encourage, and to Bob's point, Bixby also has a publication called ICT Today that many are probably already subscribers to, that publish some content on it as well. And besides learning about the technology, I would encourage anyone to, especially if they're already very familiar with Ethernet and structured cabling, ask their clients about their legacy systems, their control systems. How are they planning, specifying their control systems? They might find there's a thread to pull that gives them opportunity to, for example, at a very early starting point, you can help customers realize that if they're doing a project with HVAC today, by default, they would put in legacy cabling, but it's a very easy thing to put in, for example, single pair Ethernet cabling. Help their customers see that if you put in single pair Ethernet cabling, just the cabling, it would be backwards compatible. It'll work for the control systems they have in place, but then they'll be future proof to the next generation, to the upgrades in the future. So there are things that they can do not only to learn about the technology, but even immediately today, because the systems that are going into place in buildings are planned for 10 to 20 years or longer, and providing your customers the future validation that you'll be able to use this for the next generation of devices that come out, there's definite immediate value to be gained there.
Yeah, we're finding that one of the value propositions we envisioned for single pair when we created the original standard was cable reuse. And that's possible given recent vintage electrically healthy cable. But what we're also finding is if you have to put in more field bus cable, it may not be SPE compatible if it's really older design cable, like it doesn't have foam conductors, foam insulation on the conductors, that kind of thing. So deploying SPE cable today for a future need, it'll be SPE in the future. And now you've already got a viable cable run in there. We're not getting the test meter out trying to figure out what's up. So that's key. And it's handy cable. Our lab is doing a lot of stuff with the standards genre for the volt server type application that Anthony talked about. Is UL is calling it class 4 power. So we're doing a lot of class 4 power qualification testing in our labs. And one of the media that we're doing it on is single pair Ethernet, because it's 18 gauge cable. It's basically really awesome speaker wire too, by the way, if you're a stereo guy. But
multi-purpose, right?
Multi-purpose. You could do anything with it. But the class 4 power thing, that's going to be another transformational thing, because you're going to be able to safely transmit pulsed power and really do some awesome things with it, and it's going to change things around. And what made the hotel in Fort Worth so unique is because it was a historical building. We weren't going down there with hole saws and greenleaf punches and knocking holes in 100-year-old plaster to run conduit. That's what really made the presence of PoE and the volt server application really helpful. Was you're going to maintain the historic beauty of that that structure.
And there's a lot of that going around. Not everything is a flat surface that painting on blank canvas. I'm in New York and you're in Chicagoland, and there's so many other places like that around the globe that have existing infrastructure, whether it be London or wherever. This is something that has an application, a solution for applications that already exist. So again, listening to Wise Up on Anthony Romeo, having two geniuses, an old crabby guy named Bob Voss and Mike Vermeer from Panduit Corporation, that have blessed us with their time and the amount of knowledge that they have. Again, I encourage everybody to check out their websites that they've mentioned along this podcast. All of that information will be in the show notes. We'll make sure of that. Right, Mike? Right, Bob? Yes.
You
Yes.
bet.
Certainly.
No, I really don't have any more questions because you've hit me with a lot of information to digest. Um, I think our listeners will definitely walk away with a little bit more knowledge on single pair Ethernet and the applications that it serves, making a dumber building more intelligent and a lot of use cases out there. So again, for quality infrastructure needs, you can always contact me, Anthony Romeo of Wise Components, or anyone in our team of Wise Components. We've been servicing the ICT community since 1975. Um, by all means, do check out Panduit Corporation, www.panduit.com. Anywhere in the world, Panduit has been manufactured for a multitude of years. Partnerships with General Cable, Prysmian, and providing an end-to-end full solution. So do check them out as well. Mike, Bob, I can't commend you enough for taking this time out of your hectic schedules to come on to Wise Up. Thank you for that. And hopefully in the near future at the next BICSI or Ethernet Alliance physical conference, we can get together and have a cup of coffee.
Hey,
Sounds
thanks
great,
for the
Anthony.
time, Anthony. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks again. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. This, again, you've been listening to Wise Up. Remember this stuff behind the walls, above the ceilings, running through the floors, from the data center into the office, healthcare facilities, schools. It's needed. So Wise Up and check out season 4 of Wise Up, kicking off with Panduit Corporation.